Hi, everybody. My name is Chloe. I'm on the community agreements team, and this is a bit of a different viewpoint on this use-inspired research process that's more based on how we function as collaborators, right? So on the right is the picture from our working group meeting in Boise and how chaotic our ideas seemed at first. And we spent the last couple of months trying to narrow this down and define what community agreements mean to us as a team and how we'd like to inform other people who are doing these use-inspired collaborative research projects to help their collaboration succeed. Next slide, please. And one click. So over the past couple of months, we've spent a lot of time defining what community agreements mean to us. So community agreements are agreements that are established early and decided upon collectively by collaborative groups. They involve democratized decision-making processes, meaning that more than just one group member is responsible for making decisions on behalf of the group. It involves organizational frameworks, includes preventative measures for potential conflicts in the future. It's essential for trust building and cross-sector work. If we're going to be including more sectors into our research, we need to be prepared to borrow things from the social justice and community engagement space to better inform our collaborations. It's also important to note that community agreements take time to form and they take time to continue implementing throughout a collaboration, but they're definitely worth it because they hopefully create a more equitable space for decision-making and collaboration. And again, it's rooted in social justice in the community engagement space. And throughout our conversations, we've come to believe and understand that organization and preparation in these collaborative agreements and in these collaborative projects are part of equity and including equity into our projects. Next slide, or one click, please. So what are not community agreements? We have decided that legal agreements are not community agreements. Legal agreements are more binding documents that might cause more mistrust in a group than trust. So we're talking about conversations that would happen before any legal documentation is signed to make sure that everybody who's involved in a collaboration is there for the right reasons or wants to be there for the same reasons. And there's some kind of conversation and trust building before that process starts. They're also not the same for every collaboration group, timeline, or project scope. Again, if we're talking about more user groups being involved in our use-inspired research projects, we have to think about how we should change the way that we operate as a group to accommodate other sectors outside of academia, for example. They're also not the responsibility of one collaborator or facilitator to uphold. Once the community agreements are decided, they should be upheld by everyone in the group. And they're not trivial. We're trying to make the argument that it should be required and an important step of collaboration to include community agreements within the collaborative group and also with any other partners outside of the group or that are involved in the project. Next slide, please. So why do we need community agreements? For the number one most important part is for transparency, clarity, and equity. We believe that when you come into an agreement understanding why everyone is there, what everyone hopes to gain from it, what the capacity of each member is, we create more clarity and equity. With that comes decision-making structures. If one person or one group of people within a collaboration are making all the decisions for a group, it can feel less like there's ownership and less trust and responsibility. So we want to focus a lot in our definition of community agreements on decision-making structures rather than on communication. But communication is still an important element for us. So community agreements also create ideal organization and documentation, right? So if we have if we have all of these supporting documents that we share within our community, within our collaborative group, and we keep people who can't be at meetings updated, we allow people to come on and go off as they gain or finish up their interest in a project, right? It's all about communication, organization, and documentation to better create transparency, clarity, and equity. Next slide, please. So we decided to do a little survey of the working group leads in this community that we've been hearing about today. And we found that, and Jen might have another pie chart like this later on in the presentation, but we found that the majority of working group leads in our community are R1 institution representatives or private organization business representatives. And we found that the umbrella working groups were made up of academics in red, nonprofits in orange, private organizations in yellow, and government organizations in green. So if you're in this audience and you're looking at this and you're not seeing yourself represented, or you're not seeing a lot of representation from your sector, please join our community and include more of your input. Or if you have a great idea and you want to be a part of this, please join and improve the perspectives that we have here, especially from different sectors. But if you're also interested in our idea, please join us. Next slide, please. In this survey, we also asked people from all of our different working groups how they're implementing community agreements into their projects, right? So we found that establishing community agreements in general, introductions, and identifying desired outcomes such as deliverables were all being done in our working groups. But the things that we found were needing work and needed more attention were things like forming shared rules, identifying limitations, capacities, and motivations of all of our individual group members. That includes a little bit of vulnerability and trust to admit, right, those limitations and capacities. Also discussing how decisions are made and by whom. Very few groups expressed to us that they had spent time trying to create some kind of decision-making structure. And something as simple as creating an agenda for every meeting ensures that our time is being spent in an equitable way, that we're all going into a meeting understanding what's going to happen. We have a definite start time and a definite end time, and we're organized before we decide to come together to save time for everyone. So all of these things that we have listed here are parts of community agreement elements that we've identified as being really important for the successful collaboration of groups. And again, for implementing more of that equity into the way that we function as groups. Next slide, please. So we also asked for a little bit more information, a little bit more writing about how they're implementing things like or what they perceive as benefits and challenges of community agreements. And the benefits were pretty encouraging, right? So we found that people thought that community agreements are preventative guideposts. They're formal relationships that create a commitment to projects, especially with the busy schedules of everybody in this call. They build accountability and they provide a clear expectation and boundary if they're implemented. But we also found that timing, as many people have expressed to us, is a difficult part of this. If we have an hour to meet every 2 weeks, how can we take time out of that meeting to include and implement community agreements? And we would argue a lot of that work would happen before the meeting or in the first initial meetings to hopefully set up a good framework. But we also found that people said that community agreements only go so far as they are respected, right? So ensuring that there's respect that's being built into these groups is a really important thing. That trustworthiness and that accountability is really important. And there were other more advanced reactions like, okay, we have community agreements, but how do we potentially call out people who are violating our agreements, right? All of these things are challenges that are included in this process, but I'm glad to see that groups are thinking about this and identifying them. Next slide, please. So our next steps as a group are to spread far and wide Kathe's organizational template. There's a QR code here, and I'll post in the chat the link to that. But we're also interested in doing a white paper on decision-making and organizational structure and how to include that into community agreements. And we're trying to differentiate ourselves from team science. So we like the ideas of team science, but we're trying to expand this out into multiple sectors, right? So if we're trying to include communities, nonprofits, private sector, et cetera, we need to expand the way that we make decisions in our organizational structures from a more traditional academic model to something that is inspired by and rooted in community justice and community engagement principles. And we also are hoping to see a way to measure success. So what do the results look like when we have community agreements as an active part of our agreements or a part of our collaborations, and how do timelines differ when we have community agreements as an active part? So last slide, please. I'm Chloe Vorseth, and my team member is Kathe Todd-Brown, and we're really interested in bringing more people into our effort. We are only a mighty team of 2, so we'd be happy to have more people and more perspectives here, but we spent a lot of time defining this for ourselves, and we'd love to hear more perspectives. So with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, we've got time for one brief answer. Where and how can we better, it just scrolled off my screen. Where and how can we better train everyone in doing these? Specifically, what course or courses would a student take in their degree program to give them some of these skills?
Kathe, do you want to take that one?
Nice.
So a lot of graduate programs have kind of a how to science or how to be professional embedded in their curriculum. And one could think of building off of sort of a traditional, how do you manage a project, into how do you build these types of community agreements into the curriculum there. Did that answer the question?
It worked for me. Since I'm moderating, I think the answer is yes.